know it's going. Thanks for meeting with me. Okay, so I just wanna go over what we've been meeting over so far. We went over strengths and then your action steps that you said that you wanted to work on were intentional guided reading groups
Yes.
and refining stations.
Yes.
And so, we met and made a plan, and I asked you what are some of the goals and outcomes that you are striving for. So you, said that you wanted to have guided reading groups with fidelity again, that you were struggling with managing guided reading groups and monitoring the classroom.
Yes, ma'am.
And that you wanted to work on changing up some of your stations, so they were more intentional. Specifically, you said the layout of the room, so that while you were doing guided reading, that students had expectations, and that they, were taking ownership of what they were doing. So, that's what I'm going to meet with you today. We planned on co-teaching together last week, and so I was just going to ask what your thoughts are on our co-teach last week.
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being able to step away from the active teaching role and see what everything else was going on. Cause we can't concentrate on like 5 million things at once, just too many. But, it was really interesting that as long as both of us were in the room, the kids kept coming up to me trying to get me to do something when they were supposed to be pretending that I wasn't even in the room. They were still like, oh, there's an adult, I'm gonna go ask a question, instead of figuring it out on their own. So I kept having to say, no, go do your stuff. So.
By the way, I enjoyed it very much too. It was fun to be in class with you. From the planned learning outcomes, when we met last week and we kind of planned how we were gonna do the guided reading and how we were gonna do the stations and which one of us would be facilitating each part. From that plan, what's your reflection on the actual results?
I think the biggest thing that I took away from all of that was where it was easy for me to understand, this is what you're supposed to do, go do it. My students needed a little bit more of concrete, almost like, oh, I'm over here, and we designed our room that way, where we had writing desks and we had computer desks, and so they really physically needed still that concrete shift to know, oh, I'm supposed to be on a computer and I'm supposed to stay on the computer and finish my computer job, or I'm doing writing or paperwork. I'm not kidding. And about 95% of the kids have done that. They stay in the spot, they get it done, still working on the talking part, but there's only been a couple that I look up and they're at a writing desk with a computer, because they're like, what's wrong with this picture, kind of thing. So I think that concreteness is what I forget that my students still need. They're 8, so.
Exactly, yeah, good. So you were saying your takeaways were the understanding that things still need to be really concrete for young children. What did you think went well this last week?
Well, they did get to a point where they weren't coming over, again, 90 to 95% of them are staying in their seat, or at least looking like they're doing work. I think the amount of work getting done has picked up. Like the amount of the students that have makeup work has significantly reduced on that. The amount of Lexia units, we're on Wednesday and we probably have a third of the kids that have already got their units, because they nail themselves in a chair and get busy instead of flitting around from, several of the kids would do one thing for 10 minutes and another thing for 10 minutes, and they never could get locked into an assignment, so.
I would agree. From the first time that you and I, the first day that we co-taught to yesterday, big improvement.
Yeah.
In fact, I wrote that on the board for the
Yes,
kiddos.
yes.
In 4 days, a lot
Yeah.
has happened.
It made me excited because it was like, this does not need to be a month-long goal. This needs to be a very quick, intentional.
Yeah, you've done an excellent job doing that. What would you refine? Like you were talking about, you know, the kids are taking more ownership and you needed to make things more concrete. What would you still like to refine, with the students and why?
I think probably the next step for me would be to almost, like right now we really only have two choices-ish. When we have our computer stations, we have our writing stations, we do have some individual desks for tests. But there's a couple of kids, like if we have a writing table, they may be working on different things and they get to chatting a little bit about that. So I'm almost kind of wanting to expand of like, maybe even talk to the kids about what does it take for you to be able to sit at a table or near somebody and still not visit. And I want them to understand the flip side of that too is to, if they're working on the same assignment and it's something that we do together, like our social studies weekly newspapers, is I do want them to collaborate about their work. But I don't want them to collaborate about a party or a birthday party that's coming up on the weekend. So I guess getting some more choices where it's not just computer or writing. But I think we needed to start out small anyway, but then also get into the what's appropriate for collaboration and what's not appropriate for collaboration. I mean, and what's not collaboration, I guess, you know. So,
Great. What are some of the solutions to consider for student focus or engagement? We talked about how much better it has gotten even in 4 days, but still, like you were talking about them collaborating, is it about their work or is it about the party?
right.
So what are some of the solutions to consider to get the students focused and engaged, maybe for a longer amount of time?
I may require a little bit of thought.
Okay.
But I know that we've talked at a grade level about a little bit more flexible seating, so maybe some of the solution of that focus and that engagement is maybe just spreading them out instead of having 5 people at a desk or 5 desks together, because it makes it where you have some traffic flow, you know.
Right.
Maybe some of those, letting them do stuff on the floor, or, you know, just giving them a choice of getting away from people that are gonna be the ones talking about a party. So.
Exactly. You did a really good job on that, because here's a few things that I was noticing, you know, the last 4 days, is I noticed that your students are very well behaved.
Thank you.
But as time went on, they became a little bit more restless, even the best of the best, right? Their focus was leaving them because of the stamina of which you addressed earlier. They're still 8.
Yes.
I was wondering, like, when you were working on the reading articles, the social studies articles, if maybe we could break it into one article a day, and then they broke out with one of the groups that you have. I think you call them peanut butter and jelly and mac and cheese and chips and guac partners. If they could break out and do a strategy like turn and talk or think, pair, share, some kind of exit ticket. And if you feel like there's too many articles, maybe you could do a couple, but at different times as transitions, so that you can bring them, like you have their table groups, then you have a group of 2, and then I was thinking maybe they could use some of those transitions. You may have better ideas, but kind of exactly what I was noticing is what you just said.
I think our social studies needs to get a little bit deeper too, and incorporating that with the reading, I think that would be a good idea. I just had never thought about that, because it was almost like I wanna focus more on reading in ELA, but we still have to do this, so let's just get out of the way and then get back to our reading, so.
Right, but I thought that the social studies was highly, interesting, and I think the kids started out being, they wanted to talk about it, and they were pretty interested in it. By later on in the social studies lesson, they were ready to move on.
Yeah.
And like you moved to HD Word, I wondered if they could find a new partner, because some of the kids were,
Hire that person,
a little bit, and give them somebody fresh to work with.
Well, we had that other group that we've never assigned.
Yeah.
What was it,
Bacon and eggs, PB&J, mac and cheese, or chips and queso.
There was a peanut butter and jelly, that's not assigned yet.
Yeah.
So we have the other 3, we could definitely use that other, because I've been trying to figure out what to use with it. I had chosen originally to do that for task cards, but then they're not always working on the same thing on the task card, so it was like, they could sit beside each other, but they aren't gonna collaborate because they're doing two different assignments, so.
Right. So I just thought, cause I thought your kids are really well behaved and you have routines and procedures and expectations.
Well,
Why-
there's a limit to their,
ability to just
Ability,
sit
yeah.
still, I think, or keep that same stamina that they started with, you know, so if they were like in smaller chunks.
yeah.
So, that's just something to think
Mhm.
about, and you may have other ideas, but those were things that came
What
to
do
my
you wanna
mind.
start with, yeah?
What are other options and possibilities, to keep the kids focused?
Besides waiting about 5 years?
Yeah.
Um, I think it would depend on the activity. I mean, I think, like you said, on the social studies where they're doing a lot of, you know, listening to the videos and listening to all that, then maybe giving them an exit ticket or something that they are expected to do is gonna keep them more like, okay, I've gotta pay attention, versus just, and I've gone back and forth over the last couple of weeks with that, is every once in a while, especially when they're kinda getting a little antsy, I'm like, I'm fixing to ask you a question about this, you better pay attention. And I notice that they're like, okay, I'm paying attention now, versus when I don't do that, they're like, okay, just get it over with, you know, we're done.
Yeah, a perfect example of that is yesterday I came in your classroom a little bit early and you had exit tickets going on with the Fable, the interactive read aloud,
Yes.
and the kids were very attentive,
Yeah.
cause they knew that they had that sticky note, that exit ticket.
Yeah. And I'm pretty new on exit tickets for whatever reason, because I always kinda thought they had to be more of a formal, like you had to print it out, you had to make copies and all that kinda stuff, and we already make a lot of copies anyway. But when I watched somebody just with the Post-it notes, I was like, that's just so easy, like, they gotta be able to tell me this and just write it down and stuff. And for some reason, they love Post-it notes. I
They
don't-
did, all of your kids were very engaged in waiting for
Yeah.
you to take it and stick it on the
Yeah.
board and hear who had a really good response, so I think, yeah, that's a good idea. If you think of anything else, let me know and
Yeah.
I'll help you with it. What difference do you expect to see with what you and I did the last week? What are your expectations of the guided reading being done with fidelity, cause you feel like you can monitor your room better, and then the intentional stations? I know you wanna get more choices, but
Yeah.
what do you expect to see?
I kinda had the reflection last night, thinking about this, was that it all kind of, I mean, it's kind of funny, with personalized learning, it's all about kids and student agency and all that, but it almost has to start with me, and with me making it intentional, and me saying no, and with my guided reading groups, I had gotten to where, depending on the student, I was like, okay, ask me a question really quick, and I was interrupting my guided reading group, so that almost gave them permission to come interrupt, and I had to tell myself, no, they can struggle for a little bit, they can ask a friend, they can do something else, just for the short time period until I have a break where I can, it almost like they had a procedure within a procedure at that point. It's like, okay, I'm not gonna be stuck over here for an hour struggling. She's gonna finish that group and then she's gonna meet with me, you know.
Which is one thing you said was your strength when you and I had met ahead of time, which I really do think was a strength.
But
You
that's a pretty
always stop
quick
and
thing.
facilitate kids and then go back.
Yeah, that's been just recently that I have started that, you know, so that was a pretty new thing to begin with anyway. But it was working really well, is to, when I was doing guided reading groups for almost an hour, you know, poor little Johnny's over here looking at this page. I don't even know how to start for a whole hour, it's a lot of wasted time. And then the behavior and all that kind of started up. And then when I, like, okay, I could break between every group, and then Johnny can come over and say, what am I doing? Redirect, reteach kind of really quick. Then he's like not wasting an hour, he's only wasting 15 minutes, you know, so.
Right, right.
But,
Yeah, I noticed a lot of kids doing that. That was a great call on your part. So I want you to reflect on what you need from me as a coach. I gave you some feedback. I'd like for you to give me some
Okay.
feedback. Was this helpful?
Yes, it was very helpful. I think sometimes just seeing it through a different person's eyes